Good day, everyone. Welcome to our journey through some of the most profound, influential, and time blessed voices in literary history. I'm your professor, Dr. Leslie Diaz, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this subject survey of English and American literature. Okay, guys? Literature is far more than just words on a page. It is a living mirror, reflecting, of course, our experiences, our human experience, our culture, conflicts, and our identity across centuries and continents. In this course, guys, we will cross oceans and we will travel from historical depths of traditional British literary movements to the diverse, dynamic, and evolving landscape of American prose and poetry. Together, guys, we will examine not just what these brilliant minds wrote, but why their voices continue to resonate with us today. So, you join me, guys, to, of course, to explore this subject. Okay? So, let me read to you our course learning outcomes. First, recalling the meaning of literature and its different forms, genres, and elements. Second, recognizing the purpose and benefits that people can get from studying literature. And then differentiating literary discussion, literary or discussion, literary analysis, and literary interpretation from each other. And the last one, presenting a collaborative insight about the importance of studying literature as an English major student, as a future English teacher, and as an ordinary citizen. Let's move on to the next slide. It says there, a structure survey of English, British, and American literature traces how historic events, philosophical shifts, and changing cultural identities shaped the written word across the centuries. While English literature tracks the evolution of a language from its tribal Germanic roots to a global empire. American literature chronicles the forging of a distinct national identity, moving from colonial dependency to radical individualism and modern pluralism. So in this slide, guys, it provides us a macro level overview of a conceptual framework about the course. It explains the foundational differences in how English and American literature evolved, focusing on their respective historical trajectories. Okay? So here it says there traces how historic events, philosophical shift, and changing cultural identities shaped the written word across the centuries. What does it mean? It means that literature, guys, does not exist in a vacuum. This course is structural because it does not just look at random stories, it maps how external historical pressures, like for example, wars, colonization, and industrialization. And of course, philosophical movements like the Enlightenment or Romanticism directly altered the way people wrote and thought. It also says here tracks the evolution of language from its tribal Germanic roots to a global empire. What does it mean, guys? Well, it simply means that British literature is a story of linguistic and cultural expansion. It begins with the early Anglo-Saxon tribal roots, the Old English, and the Germanic origin, like Beowulf, if you know that story, absorbs French and Latin influences and matures through the Renaissance and Victorian eras as Britain grew into a global empire. It shows how a local island language expanded to dominate world literature. Okay? And if you try to look at the last part of this paragraph, let me read it. The chronicles the forging of a distinct national identity, moving from colonial dependency to radical individualism and modern pluralism. What does it mean? Here, unlike English literature, American literature is a story of breaking away and defining new identity. It starts with colonial dependency, early American writers imitating British styles. And then it shifts to the radical individualism during the American Renaissance and Western expansion. Okay? It ultimately, guys, evolves into modern pluralism. Okay? So celebrating a tapestry of diverse multicultural voices like American, African, Native American, immigrant, prospectively, and others that define modern America today. Now let's move on to the next slide. Here, if you look at the slide, says there, Survey of English British literature. The history of English literature is traditionally organized by the reigning monarchs or major historical shift in Great Britain. So we have here the Old English, the Middle English period, the Renaissance, the Neoclassical period, the Romantic period, the Victorian period, the Modern and Postmodern period. Okay? So you could see the timeline for each period. Okay? So here we have their Old English. In the Old English, okay, you take note that the oral and tradition and warrior culture during this period, okay, what defined it or the core focus here was the characterized by heroic poetry, like the Germanic tribal culture and a blend of pagan and Christian themes like what we have, I mentioned a while ago, Beowulf. And if you try to look at it, no, though this will be discussed further in the next lessons that we'll be having next time, but I am just making a little brief of it, no? So if you look at the key historical political anchor during this period, it starts with Germanic tribes and invade by Britain, okay, and the Norman conquest at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. And then we have here the Middle English period, linguistic transition under this and chivalry. Okay. The language merges with French this time. Literature shift toward the courtly love about romances and social commentary. The Canterbury Tales is already here, and it starts during the time of 1066, no, up to the it take the throne, no, Norman take the throne in 1066. So the French-speaking Normans take the throne in 1066, and that's the starts, and it ends during the introduction of the printing press, and at the end of the War of the Roses. Here we have here the third one, the Renaissance of early modern from, okay, here, what do we need to take note about, what's the core focus in this period? It's about humanism and dramatic rebirth. So there's a massive explosion of drama during this period, not only drama, but poetry and science. This includes the Elizabethan era, or the Shakespeare, okay, and the focus on human potential and classical rebirth. Okay, and take note the rise of the Tudor dynasty and the English Reformation during this time. It ends with the fall of the monarchy and the Puritan Commonwealth. While in the neoclassical period, okay, the focus here is on, or are so this the focus are about reason, order, and satire. So inspired by classical Rome and Greece, writers emphasized logic, structure, and with over emotion. So it includes the Enlightenment and sharp political satire. Okay, and the well-known author in this era was Alexander Pope. Okay, and if we try to focus on the historical and political anchor in this era, the restoration, wait for a while. So we are already in the neoclassical. So the restoration of the monarchy, the King Charles II returns in 1660, and the publication of lyrical ballads marking a rebellion against cold logic during the neoclassical. And then we have the Romantic period. Okay, under the Romantic, the the core focus under this period, we have emotion, nature, and individualism. So a passionate rebellion against the cold logic of the Enlightenment and the smoke of the Industrial Revolution. Literature focuses on the sublime beauty of nature and intense human emotion. Example, Wordsworth. That's William Wordsworth. Okay. And for the historical and political anchor during this period, the socio-political driven anchor, driven by the philosophical radicalism of the French Revolution. Then we have the Victorian period. Okay, the core focus here is on imperial pride and social critique, an era of massive industrial wealth, moral earnestness, and global imperial expansion, but also deep anxiety about science versus religion and class disparity. Example of the well-known authors under this period, okay, we have here sample Charles Dickens. Okay, and then, okay, take note that during this period there was a strictly book ended by the reign of Queen Victoria. Okay, and then the last one is about the modern postmodern. Focus is on fragmentation, the disillusionment and diversity. So modernism, early 20th century, broke traditional narrative rules to reflect a broken world after World War World War II. Okay. And then socio-political anchor shaped by the trauma of two world wars, the collapse of the British Empire, and the rise of digital globalization. So, just a little uh, background only. Anyways, this will be discussed further. I'm just giving you a glimpse of each of the period. Okay, now we have the next slide. Okay, it says there, what's the next slide here? American literature develops along a parallel timeline but filters its movements through a unique frontier landscape, religious foundation, and an evolving democratic experiment. So we have to take note of the colonial and early national period, the American and Renaissance, Romanticism, Realism, and Naturalism, American Modernism, post-World War II, and postmodern contemporary literature. Okay, so that's it, guys. So take note of this important period also. Okay, just a little add-on information under each period. Okay, so here, colonial and early national, the the core focus under this, okay, uh, is about survival. Okay, survival and sermons for a while, guys. Okay, sermons. So begins during this period begins with religious, strict political writings. Okay, okay. I'm getting my batteries are getting low. Okay, okay. And okay, I need to charge first. Okay, anyways. Okay. And then we have here American Renaissance Romanticism. So the British of a true American voice, that's the focus. Writers stopped imitating Europe and created a distinct style. So it emphasized deep emotion, intuition, the sublime American wilderness, and transcendentalism. So the belief in radical self-reliance and the divinity of nature. And the well-known author here, guys, is Edgar Allan Poe. Okay, that's the American Renaissance Romanticism. And the conclusion of the American Civil War in 1865, which shattered the country's romantic idealism. So these are some important notes about the period. Okay. Okay. Anyway, this will be discussed further next time. Just a little brief or an overview of each period. Just giving you short one only. Okay, but not a thorough discussion for each period because we will have time for the explanation for each period next time. And then we have here realism and naturalism. So the focus here is the harsh truth the harsh truth of reality, a direct rejection of romantic idealism, driven by the gritty realities of industrialization, urbanization, and post-war trauma. Here, realism focused on every ordinary life and regional dialects. So take note, well-known author here is Mark Twain. Okay? And here, naturalism went darker, viewing humans as helpless victims of heredity, psychology, and environment. Okay? And then take note, guys, the construction era during this period, rapid westward expansion, the rise of factory labor, and the gilded, okay, age. Okay, and then the last one, oh, not yet. So we have here American modernism. So the focus here is disillusionment and experimentation, a period of intense artistics and experimentation. So here, traditional storytelling was broken down to much a fragmented world. So it covers the psychological tool of war, the roaring 20s and the Great Depression, and the vibrant cultural explosion of the Harlem Renaissance. Okay, and here World War I in 1914 and the end of the World War II in 1945. So it was bookended by this no World War I and World War II. And then the last one is about the post-World War, the second or the postmodern contemporary. And the focus here is about pluralism, irony, and diverse perspectives. So take note, guys, postmodernism question absolute truth, using irony, of course, and metafiction and pop culture. So as the decades progress in the contemporary era, American literature evolved into a rich multicultural tapestry, amplifying minority, immigrant, and women's voices that explore modern identity, technology, and globalization. Okay, and then what else do we need to know during this period? So the Cold War, civil rights movement, the rise of the mass media age, and digital globalization. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so there's a comparison already. I made a comparative matrix. The key intersections, while distinct, the traditions have constantly cross-pollinated each other's evolutionary lines. Okay, so take note of this one. And each of the era really has something to focus upon. Okay, so yeah. So we have there the British focus, the American counterpart, and the core static difference. Okay, so that's it. And then, so I hope you're reading this one. Okay, and it's self-explanatory actually. And then we have here, I have a question. I raised a question. What is literature? Because we will be dealing with different kinds of genre and has something to do with literature. So what is really literature? Okay. So in the study of literature, we have to analyze the text requires breaking it down into its structural, stylistic, and artistic components. So we will be analyzing different kinds of literary pieces. So together they form the vocabulary of literary analysis. So this section this slide explains that reading literature at a university level is not just a passive enjoyment. It is an active analytical process to understand a piece of literature. So the students like you must treat it like a machine. You have to break it down into smaller functional parts for you to see how the whole thing works. So these parts are categorized, of course, into forms, genres, elements, and devices, which later on we will be discussing. So take note, guys, that let's move on. Let's see the other slide first. Okay. So here, so I've mentioned literary forms, genre, devices, and elements. So in the study of literature, analyzing a text requires, of course, breaking it down into its structural, stylistic, artistic components. So these components are categorized, as I mentioned. No, I mentioned forms, genres, elements, and devices. So together, they form the vocabulary of literary analysis. Okay, so literary form, guys, refers to the external structure, physical layout of a piece of writing. It is the architectural blueprint of the text. So in other words, literary form refers to the external structure or physical layout of a piece of writing. It is actually as I mentioned, it is the architectural blueprint of the text. So form is all about mechanics, shape, and physical presentation. It is a separate. It is separate from the content, what the story is about, and it in, focuses instead on how the text is physically constructed. Okay, guys. So next. Okay, where did I stop? Okay, so let's have the literary genre. Okay, so let's have this one. Okay, so we have the prose and the poetry and the drama. So the literary forms. Okay, there are three traditional pillars of creative writing, which we know. Uh, These are the prose, poetry, and drama. And it says there, writing under prose, writing that mimics the natural flow of everybody's speech, everyday speech, organized into sentences and paragraph without a formal rhythmic structure. Example of this are novels, essays, and short stories. Okay, so take note, guys, that prose is the most common form of written language. It is, or its defining feature is its unconstrained structure. So unlike poetry, guys, it doesn't care about syllable counts or line breaks. So what does it focus? It focuses on complete thoughts organized into grammatical sentences and paragraphs. It is designed to sound like human speech or natural truth. How about poetry? It says there poetry, writing that uses meter, rhythm, cadence, and line breaks to evoke emotional or static responses. It is structured in lines and stanza rather than paragraph. That's why when we analyze poem, guys, no, we're counting the syllables or we're counting the rhyme. We're taking down. We're considering the rhymes also. Okay. What else? The use of the meter. Okay. We focus on this when we analyze poetry. Okay. What else do we need to know about poetry? Where did I stop? Wait for a while. Okay, what else do we need to know about poetry? Writing that uses meter, as I mentioned already, from line becomes stanza to a paragraph. So if prose is walking, poetry, guys, is dancing. It breaks away from the rules of ordinary speech to prioritize sound, musicality. That's why it has a rhyme. and intense imagery. So its architecture relies on deliberate placement of lines and stanzas, using layout and rhythm to dictate how a reader experiences emotion. That's why if you are really, if you are an observant one, no, when you read a poem, it somehow uh, the author really express, no, his emotion in his own poem. Okay, so the author created or composed a poem, okay, out of his experience. Okay, he expresses his emotion through writing. Okay, and then the last one is drama. I remember I also made a lot of poems, and I will be sharing these poems to you as we continue our journey with our subject in literature. And of course, I will be asking you also to create your own poem. Don't you worry. Besides from analyzing stories, here you will also be composing your own poems. And then we have here drama, writing structure entirely through dialogue and stage directions, explicitly designed to perform by actors before an audience. Okay, so what do we mean here? Drama is a unique literary form because it is interdependent. And where did I stop? Right. Okay. It is written text intended to be translated into physical space and spoken voice. Its structural framework relies on two things: what character says, that's dialogue, and what characters physically do, that's stage directions. So it is meant to be seen and heard, not just read silently. So that is all about drama. So again, there are three, the literary forms. We have example of literary forms. We have prose, poetry, and drama. Okay, and then next, we have here literary genres. Okay, when we speak of genre, it is a category of composition determined by its tone, content, technique, or length. While form is how it looks, genre is what it is about. So, if form is structural container, guys, sample book versus stage script, genre now is the flavor, the theme, and expectations of what happens inside that container. Okay, that is now genre. Okay, form will just be the shape. Okay, what's the shape of the book? It's just like that. Okay, so a book versus a script. And then for the genre, as I mentioned, it's the flavor to it, the theme, okay, and expectation of what happens inside that shape, inside that container, okay. And then take note of the major creative genres. Here we have fiction, non-fiction, poetry subgenre, and drama subgenres. So fiction, stories born from imagination. Historical fiction, science fiction, fantasy, mystery. While non-fiction, factual writing based on real events, people, and ideas. An example of this are bibliography, essays, and then poetry subgenres, this lyric focus on emotion, narrative, and dramatic spoken character. And then we have here drama subgenre, tragedy focusing on downfall, and suffering, and comedy focusing on humor and resolution. Okay? So I hope you're learning from our discussion. Okay? So that's it. Subgenre. Another take note that subgenre we said under poetry, no? Poetry subgenre. Okay, the focus of the verse. That's why we have there lyric poetry, okay? Lyric poetry, narrative poetry, okay, and dramatic poetry. So when we speak of lyric poetry, guys, deeply personal and heavily focused on intense emotion and expression, okay? And narrative poetry, poetry that tells a complete story featuring a plot, characters, and setting. Example of this would be epic poems or ballads. And dramatic poetry, poetry that is explicitly spoken by a specific character, written in the voice of an imagined persona. And then next would be literary elements. So literary elements are the inherent ingredients needed to construct a narrative. If you are writing a story or a play, these are the fundamental pieces you must include for structure to exist. What are these? We have the plot, the character, setting, conflict, or the point of view. So let's define these literary elements. So think of this as the inherent ingredients or the DNA of narrative. And an element is something that exists naturally in every single story, guys. So if you try to write a story or a play, okay, and remove even one of these five pieces, what are those? Plot, character, setting, conflict, or point of view, the entire structure, guys, collapses because they are fundamental requirements for a narrative to exist. Okay, so we have their plot. I hope you know what's the meaning of this. But just to give you an idea, what is this plot all about? So when we speak of the plot, the sequence is the sequence of the events that make up the story. So you have the beginning, the middle, and the end. So it is what happened and why it happened. What happened to the story and why it happened. Okay? And then we have here character. Of course, when we speak of character, okay, it could be animals. Characters could be animals. Okay, characters could be animals or people. So individuals. We're talking about individuals or personified entities. Carry out, of course, somebody has to carry the action, okay, in the story, carry out the action of the plot and experience the story events. And then setting, okay, of course, we know this, it's the location. We're talking about the physical location. Where did the story happen? The time, period, and the social environment in which the story takes place. So here it establishes now the atmosphere in the story. That's the setting. And then it's the conflict. Okay, what happened? When we speak of conflict, it talks about struggle, guys. Nah? So the central struggle or the problem between the opposing forces. Okay, what are those forces? Could be the character versus himself, no? Character versus character, or character versus self, character versus society that drives the plot forward. That's conflict. And then we have here the last one is point of view. So when we speak of point of view, could be the idea, perspective. So the perspective or the lens through which the story is narrated. The first person. That's why if you look at the story, okay, if you've read the story, if you have read the story, mayroong dyan, there's an I. So third person, he or she. So that's first person, third person, he or she. So it decides who is telling the story and how much information the reader is allowed to know. So that is point of view. Okay? And then the last one is literary devices. Of course, there are a lot of literary devices that author use. Okay, it helps the author capture the interest of the readers. Huh? Uh, by using vivid description, imagery. Okay? So when we speak of literary devices, guys, literary devices are stylistic tools. It's the style of the author that authors deliberately use to hint at deeper meanings, emphasize themes, shape the text of tone, or achieve a specific artistic effect. Okay. So what are some example? Figures of speech. You know what are those figures of speech? Example of this figures of speech, simile, metaphor, personification, okay, irony. These are some example. Then imagery, narrative and structural devices, symbolism, allegory. So these are some example of literary devices. I have just given you a glimpse of it, but this will be thoroughly discussed, okay, next time around. So I hope anyway this is just an introduction, just an overview of the things that you will be learning in this subject. So I hope you learned something for today. Again, okay, good luck, guys, and welcome to this subject.